First off, I don't know if your commissioner online has a question. Oh, the hand just went down. Okay, sorry. Casey Mullins, Loveland resident, Ward 2. Wow, the new mic is going to be scary with my voice. I want to commend you commissioners. I want to thank you for what you have done, for what you are trying to do. You know, you've taken on a role that many were unwilling to even attempt, including myself. But I appreciate all that you do. I do believe in many ways, and I'm willing to say it on the record that yes, your past chair did not maybe reach out as much or work with the city attorney and the city manager. However, Commissioner Walsh, thank you. Stay the course. You know, I listened last week or to the last meeting, and you called some stuff out. And if I had been in the room, had it not been on Zoom, you would have heard me cheering. You were asked, you took on a voluntary position, not a position that puts you in a place where you need to know exactly what's going on in the city of Loveland. Sorry, it's these gentlemen's jobs to guide. That you all were skewered at city council, and how long it took for someone to stand up and go, oh, excuse me, I told them they couldn't do a report like that. Your chairman was dropped into something, and you all have stayed the course and are trying to do what needs to be done in this city. I have extensive experience working with city government. What I would like you to look into, what I'd like you to think about, is that we continually have, at council, we continually have executive sessions regarding the city manager and the city attorney's jobs. I don't know about any of y'all's work experience, but wherever I was, we filled out some type of survey about what we thought about our boss. How do we trust our boss as an employee? Seems to me there's got to be something like that. And that should be looked at, I believe. I don't know if there's something like that, but if there is, it certainly only happens in executive session. That's a document that the residents of Loveland should see, because of the way we are a home rule city. We do have a lot of trust and power relying on the city administration. Look at that maybe in your time. Thank you all.
Thank you.
I just asked thank you, Casey. City manager, am I correct that there actually is a 360 employee interview or a review of their review up for the city employees, right? Don't they issue a evaluation type form of you and the various department heads? I thought I saw something along those lines.
Thank you, Commissioner Walsh. Our process of evaluation allows for review of a 360 review process to occur if it is the employee's wish to have that done. It's not mandatory.
I thought I saw some type of a report, I think within the past year, of employees' evaluations of leadership. I thought I saw something. Mm-hmm.
So I think what you're talking about, Commissioner, is what we call a staff employee engagement survey. And so we did put some information out to council on that. We're in that process now of taking the information. We talk to our staff at all levels, separate out where, who they can comment about by the knowledge of it, what terms mean, like executive leadership includes myself, our department directors, and so forth. It doesn't include council, so it's just staff driven. And so we receive those feedback back from all the employees who participate. It is. Okay. So we have that process to do. We do that every 2 years. So we're in the process now of taking that information we've received from our staff and with the comments that are provided and working back with each work group of more than 5 people and taking that information and working with that work group as to what their concerns were, what they thought was working well, and what they thought could be improved, and working in small groups to have those discussions. So that's a process now that's ongoing.
Okay, and so there was one within the past 2 years that was released, right? And is that publicly available or is that confidential?
I think we've provided parts of that information because our council asked that same question. So if you would like, if it's the will of the group, I'd be happy to find out what we can provide to you. Some of the comments we're kind of careful about because they do identify individuals, but the overall numeric scoring and how that all works out is good information for us to know.
Yeah, it was numeric. It wasn't it was numeric scoring in general.
Yeah, it was numeric scoring.
So I know I think it was a publicly available document. So if you could either share that, if you need a motion, I'll make a motion to request that and we can share it on our page, or if it's already publicly available, if you could just let us know, where people can find it.
Be happy to.
Okay, thank you. Do we need a motion?
Yes.
Okay, I move to request the reports that we're describing that show the, I don't know how to,
Employee engagement survey.
employee engagement surveys, the past one. And then we can share that on our page, or if it's just a matter of pointing us to the cubby hole in the city website that has it, we can do that too. Any seconds?
Alrighty. Is there any more public comment?
We did have one emailed in that needs to be read into record.
That's for next week. It was sent in today, so it should come in next week's notes.
We have it here.
Yeah, but it'll
It says
be
for June 6th.
it'll be in the packet though for next week because we didn't receive it on time.
Like we had a motion earlier that passed that we will read all of these into record.
It will be read into record next week.
It came in before this meeting, I think.
Since it's
I
not in
don't
the
think
meeting.
that's right. I'm sorry,
No,
but
that's okay.
we had a motion that was never specified which week, when the deadlines were.
So
Thank you.
it'll be in the notes for next week so that it's publicly available to everyone, and then we'll read it that week as well. Yeah, so everything will go into next week's packet. So next up we have our Aaron, and Aaron first, please.
Yes, thank you. I wonder, Chair Mayor, if we could swap something to discussion topics on the agenda. You missed my hand up when you were asking about agenda items.
Yes.
I wonder if there's a possibility to switch the conversation of the code of ethics with the survey update. If we could do the survey update before the code of ethics discussion. I might have to leave the meeting early and I really want to hear the updates on the survey.
Okay. Does anybody have any opposition to that? All right, then we will switch the order.
Thank you.
Commissioner Schneider.
Yeah, I wanted to reassert what Commissioner Dreith said. I saw that the email would be included in the next packet. I did not see where it's not allowed to be read. I mean, public comment is timely. I'm not sure what rule disallows that.
Because I don't see the difference between these people speaking now. They came in right now. There's no public record of them coming. We had one emailed in. I think it should be read into record tonight.
I agree. And I just didn't see anything when it was distributed saying that it wouldn't be read, just that it would be printed for the next packet.
Okay, that's fine. Mr. Garcia, could you help us out on that? Should we change the order or should we just go ahead and read it?
Chair Meyer, I believe that your process in the past has not been to do that. If you choose to do that today, I would recommend that you do that with a 2/3 motion to override your normal process and read it into the record.
Okay, so all in favor of reading today, the public comment we received today without the meeting packet, please raise your hand. All opposed? Motion, ooh. Okay, let's do it again. All in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All opposed? 2, 6. Motion does not pass. We will read it next week. All right, so let's go ahead. Are there any phone in comments? Forgot to ask about that.
Thank you, Chair Meyer. Users, if you'd like to speak to public comment, please press *9 on your phone or choose the raise your hand feature. I do not see anyone, Chair Meyer.
Awesome. Then could we please welcome our presentation? Are you ready? We're ready for you.
Yes, I think
Well, good evening, Commission. It's
Can I
good to
pause you
meet
really quick? There are some people on Zoom that have been having a hard time tonight. So could you adjust your mic maybe or hold it? Thank you.
Are you able to hear me out there?
Awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Good. Well, good evening. I'm Bob Carden. I'm with the Prothman Company, and we do executive searches throughout the nation for top executives for cities and counties. And I'm here I'm the lead consultant on the process to bring forward a police chief to the city of Loveland. And so we started that process today. And part of that process is to have stakeholder meetings. Now, a little bit about myself. I'm retired from law enforcement. I spent 38 years in law enforcement. I was chief of police of 3 cities from a population of about 22,000, 25,000 up to 125,000. I reside in Washington. Our company is located in Issaquah, Washington. And so not only do I do this and lead consultant, I also teach for Columbia College. I teach ethics and morality and criminal justice. I also teach corrections and penology and then community corrections. So I'm the course developer for all 3. Married, retired, living in Washington, hope to move to Arizona soon, get out of the ice. So that's the next thing I'd like to do. But thank you for being a part of this, not only commission, but those folks that are here in the audience tonight, because this is very important that we make the right decision on the next police chief. And we get that input so that I'm able to identify those that apply. And when I do my screen downs, and I'll talk about that process here in just a few minutes, that we bring the very best that we can to Loveland that will fit for this community. Because not everybody that applies should be a police chief, and not everybody that applies could certainly not be a police chief in Loveland. It takes a certain person, and the only way I can do that is to find the right mix and the right feedback from you, and that's what I'm going to hope that I get from all of you this evening. A little bit about the process. I spent a couple of days here talking to stakeholders. I actually arrived yesterday, and I spent a little time in the community talking to a couple of folks out there as well to kind of get an idea of what their perception is of some of the issues within the organization, what are they doing well, and what might need to be addressed. And so that's hopefully what we're going to get out of this as well. I'm also meeting with the officers, the Fraternal Order of Police, the non-sworn, as well as council members, this community, this organization, as well as just a number of different groups here in 2 full days. I'll take that information back after 2 days, and we will develop a profile that we feel we will send out throughout the country. We'll send out now over 900 to 1,000 invitations to folks to apply for this position. internal folks as well. And from that, we will get a number of, we'll leave that up for about, once that profile is done, you can look at it. When it goes up on prothman.com, you'll see it. It'll say Chief of Police, City of Loveland. And that will go out once that's done and the city manager approves it, that will go out and it will be out for 30 to 45 days. If we get enough applicants, then we'll begin our interview process. If not, we'll leave it up a little bit longer. Now our interview process basically goes that I look at first and foremost, let's say we get 30 applications for chief here. So the first part of that will be for me to look at the applications and make sure that they meet the objective characteristics of a chief. Do they have their certifications? Do they have their driver's license? Do they have experience at upper management levels? Those kind of things are very objective. The subjective part comes next. Once I screen that down to about 12 people or so, then I will do individual interviews with the folks. And then that's when we get into the more subjective things. What is your approach to policing? What are some of your concerns about some of the things that we've seen in our profession in recent years, including Loveland? And how would you adapt the agency to that? What would you bring to the organization? Other things that I would get from these stakeholder meetings. What I'm trying to do is to bring that down to about 5 people, five applicants that I can bring to Loveland. And the city manager has the final say on who we bring to Loveland. I usually try to give him 5 that I recommend and maybe 2 alternates that I would recommend so that we can get a good grouping here. Once we decide on that, then we will bring those folks, the city will bring those folks here for a 2-day process. The first day will be a community meet and greet in hopefully a large room where they'll go through and they'll get a chance to meet the candidates, talk to the candidates, ask them some questions. And then we'll have them introduce themselves, give a bio, why they want to be here, and then I'll probably ask them some questions from my list of that I get from my stakeholders. That they won't know the question until it happens. Then we will have the next day. We'll have a series. We'll have a series of panels probably, and those panels will be made up of community members, law enforcement professionals, department directors, whoever the city manager and the city feels that they need to bring into those different groups. There's usually 5 groups, about 6 to 7 people. These folks will each go to those panels, and at the end of the day, excuse me, at the end of the day, we will identify those folks that have these various strengths and those that have some concerns. What we'll find is the ones that I bring, there'll be a couple folks that will have a large number of strengths and a few listed concerns. There will be others that have a few listed strengths and what that's all about and all these concerns. And what that's about is fit for your community and the kind of police you want. I'm a strong believer, and I've always been since I began, that the reason we do municipal policing is to provide the kind of policing that the community wants. If we're not meeting the needs of the community, then we need to address those things because that's why we exist. It frankly is, and it's been that way from the time that we started in law enforcement. We are here to keep the peace. If we can keep the peace, we don't always have to enforce the law. We can use discretion because if we're keeping the peace, there's not rules being broken. So that's our first role, is to keep the peace. And that was taught to me years and years ago. And it seems to work. And I seem to think that we may have gotten away from that. I'm not talking about Loveland specifically. I'm talking about law enforcement in general to some degree. And we need to move a little bit back towards the guardian approach. And I think that that's what the community is asking us for in general, everywhere. And if that's the case, that's what we need to respond to. But every city is different. And this city is, the only way I find out what kind of policing that you want is by asking you. So you were sent a list of possible questions to respond to. And what I'd like to do is kind of talk about that and take some notes, and any questions that you might have, I'd be happy to answer. I'm here as a listener more than anything else, because without me being a good listener, we're not going to get the right person here. And that's what I want to do. So if you would like to start, I'm looking for that sheet. Let's see if I have that here. It's out front here. So some of the things that we want to know is what qualities are you looking for in a police chief? And I'm talking about the subjective ones. I'm going to take some notes as we do this. But I would like to know what are some of the qualities you're looking for that's going to work here in Loveland.
Commissioner Barrett.
So, given the problems that the city has seen, I think that we have certain qualities that we really must have in our next police chief. The first for me is integrity. The person is going to do what they say they're going to do. Honesty, don't lie to the community even by omission. Fairness and ability to listen to stakeholders and absorb the information that they're given. Courage to take immediate action when it's warranted. And an absolute refusal to stay with the status quo. I don't know if Assistant Chief Lori Scott is even interested in the position, but if you would look at her, you could build the profile by talking with her.
Who is this again?
Assistant Chief Lori Scott
Lori Scott?
demonstrates all of these qualities.
Okay. Anything else? Some other things that you would like to see?
Yeah, I just have I worked in the public sector for a long time, and I have just some observations. And I think part of the question is really what it comes down to is leadership. I mean, I think that we have a lot of managers and we have very few leaders, and I think there's a difference. And I think understanding that is critical. And I think one of the mistakes that I've observed time and time again is that experience gets equated to competency. When you've worked in the public sector for a long period of time, that somehow that becomes a barometer of competency. And I think there's a lot of competent people that wouldn't have the depth of experience as a chief that could be very good fits for Loveland. And I think that's part of, sometimes I hope when you look at that you look a little bit deeper than just doing an equation about how many years somebody has in positions they've been in, because they could have been in those positions and done horrible jobs or mediocre jobs, quite frankly. And so I think I would hope that you would, in looking at that, and I would hope that the direction that's been given to you by our leaders here is to look for good, strong leadership qualities and competency over experience, because I think, I keep repeating that, but it's been a pet peeve of mine, having worked and how decisions are made about leadership or about management positions and executive level positions. A mediocre person with a lot of experience gets rated higher than somebody with less experience but greater competency. So I think, to me, that's.
When I begin my interview process, not just the screening process was what we talk about primarily as objective. When we talk about the subjective things, where I sit down with the candidates and I start to talk to them, that's where we really get into the nuts and bolts of what they know, how they police, how they are, what kind of leaders. Are they managers? Are they leaders? We look at their background to see how much time they've spent in operations and how much time they spent in administration. Because we do know in this business that sometimes folks will stay in administration because they have a real hard time doing the operation side of it. You have to have both. You have to have a balance of both of those things to run a department, but you definitely have to have experience in the various options, different divisions that we've had as you come up. You got to have spent some time coming up. And it isn't just about time, it's about what you did and what you accomplished. Part of my approach to this is going to be, what can you accomplish in Loveland? How do you address this? We know we have some things that we have to address. I mean, the report that you had did obviously said that we have some things we have to address. And, how are you going to address those things? How are you going to make those changes and still maintain folks within the organization that need to be here and value people? All those things are very important, is what you said. And we will spend some time doing that. But we don't just say, well, you have this many years of experience, so you should be the next chief. I think the last one I did is a good example of that in Bellingham, Washington. Is we had a lot of folks with experience, but the person that we placed there finally actually was a lieutenant out of the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, and she had only just recently been given a job as the chief of Stanwood, but she was the best option because she met what they needed for the organization, not because she was a female, but because she had the approach to the policing that needed to be done in that community. And I think that's the kind of things we do, is we try to fit our next chief so that they fit this community. And that's why it's so important to get this kind of feedback from you and the rest of you, so that when I sit down with them, I don't bring someone that's not going to necessarily fit here. So, but just years of experience, they have to have a lot more than just the time on the job. Does that answer your question?
Real quick, I have Commissioner Thompson, Commissioner Black, Commissioner Schneider. You're all on my list, so you don't have to hold your hand up. Thank you.
I'll be quick. It does. The proof is in the action and who you choose. So but the follow-up question I had for that was, what are the quality? I was curious, what were the qualities that have been communicated to you by city leadership for this position?
When you say leadership, do you mean in the police department or do you mean the city manager?
I would say both. I just would be curious as to what has been communicated to you so far in terms of the qualities of the police chief that you've been directed to look at.
Flexibility, ability, I would say flexibility, communication, ability to communicate, be a leader, not just a manager. I think that's very important. I've heard that more than one time, but I absolutely agree with that anyway. I think the ability to have some experience, in other words, if I don't have any experience or I don't understand some of the aspects, I don't have to be a technician in everything, but I should have a broad understanding of police work. And I think the other thing is it's very important. I think it's very important that a police chief also sees themselves as a department head and that they work well within the department head structure. Because a lot of the cities I worked for, not a lot, the last city I worked for, we had a motto, and it was, we see it, we fix it. It didn't mean if it was just because it was out of the typical police things, we didn't do it. We got a hold of the right people to handle it. I think we have to be, again, those are the kind of things I'm hearing. And I think we have to be flexible as a law enforcement officer to recognize that perhaps the city would like to see us a little bit more guardianship and more communication, both within and externally. Very important. The city manager made it very clear to me that the chief needs to be visible and be out and be a representative of the organization and be at these meetings, be out in the community, and as well as within the department. You know, being a police chief isn't a 40-hour job. It's a lot more than that. And it's a matter of, you know, being in your uniform, taking pride in your uniform so that everybody in the city recognizes who you are and can approach you and talk to you. Your officers, that you get out and you talk to your officers, you talk to your non-sworn staff, and you get to community events and you are there and you're seen as the leader of the organization. And I think that's been very, very important from Mr. Adams, that we find someone that, those are some of the things. There's a lot more than that, but those are some of the things that we're looking at.
Commissioner Thompson.
I just have a couple comments. I think that the chief has to be a profound communicator. And I mean that in the sense that he needs to be able to communicate to the public. He needs to be able to communicate to his staff. He needs to be able to communicate to his boss. Everybody. You know, he has to be good at it, and he has to be straight when he's doing it, you know, very trustworthy individual. And I think he also needs more visibility in the community. I think being out amongst the people, you know, like you said, with his uniform on, and people go, hey, that's the chief of police, you know, I think that's very important.
It is very important.
And so them are the things that I think are really, really important in a police chief. Not only a police chief, but any person that takes a job needs to have those qualities.
I absolutely agree with you. Being visible is huge. Not out to be a politician, but out to be amongst the community, and not being afraid to get a mark unit and still be in uniform and get out there. I'm not saying handle a bunch of calls, because they have other duties to do too. But I always found it best for me to get out at least a couple of times during the month, once or twice a month, and get out on patrol and just back up folks and see them and talk to the community, pull over and business people. That's leadership. And that's being a good leader as a police chief. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth for some folks, but it shouldn't be, because one thing for leader, and I will say this, you're only as successful as the people around you, and you have to trust those folks, and you have to listen to those in the community, and you've got to make changes based on what the feedback you receive. And if you're not receiving any, which we find in the report, that communication is lacking. We're just like, I'm reading the report. I'm not hearing those things, either from the community or from my officers or my staff, my non-sworn staff, how am I going to address it? It's something that you have to communicate. And if you can't fix that, you can't fix the other. It's kind of like like I used an analogy at the last meeting. If your boat springs a hole, you don't jump overboard, you fix the hole. All right? You've got a great department in a lot of ways. If you look at things and you look at the history, you've got the support, you've got the structures, you've got the financial support, you've got the community support, the whole, but you've got an issue, a segment that we probably should address. And the thing is, if we don't get it addressed at this point, how do we get it addressed? So we've got to identify those things again through the meetings like this. I think the next chief needs to really be a part of that on an ongoing basis, as well as whatever works within the city manager. But the chief has to be very visible in these meetings. It's key, because you can't answer the questions if you're not at the meeting. So very important. Thank you for your question or your comment.
Next, Commissioner Schneider, please.
As soon as my dog starts barking, right? Sorry.
Well, I have dogs too.
Thank you for committing to listen to us. A few things. One, have you seen the internal affairs report from Jensen and Hughes? Out of curiosity, I'm wondering if that's informing your process.
No, I have not. I don't think I would probably be privy to that.
Okay, thank you. So I think any incoming police chief needs to probably understand deeply the need for damage control in our community. There's, the reason we exist as a trust commission is because of the Karen Garner incident, and there is a lot of distrust in our community towards the police, and that is unfortunate for the police and for the community members. We have to have trust if we're going to have public safety. We have to have trust if people are going to want to call the police, and particularly, BIPOC people, undocumented immigrants, someone with a mental health issue. We have to trust that that's a safe call to make. And right now, I hear from a lot of people in our community that is not a feeling that we have. So I hope that anyone that is brought in as a finalist or a police chief is someone that understands that and is deeply dedicated to communication, as many of the other commissioners have stated. Transparency. And in addition, we've talked a lot about expanding mental health partnerships, right, with Summit Stone. I know we have a contract for that. It's quite limited at the moment. I wonder if that can be expanded to other agencies, if the new police chief would be willing to allocate some budget to ensure that when we have mental health concerns that people need to call the police for help with, that people aren't going to end up injured or, sadly, I hate to say this, injured or dead. It's really important. So that's, I guess, my biggest feedback. And then my question is, how do we get to participate as a stakeholder? And thank you so much.
Well, let's see. First, let's talk about mental health issues and that sort of thing. Obviously, when you lose trust of the community, or you lose trust of a segment of the community, it's so hard to build that back. You can work years to build the trust and lose it overnight. And then it takes some years again, but hopefully not that long to do it this time. I think you see in our business, in our industry, in law enforcement in general, that we have shown and we are demonstrating across the board. I know being outside of Seattle, I see it and working with Bellingham, which I recently did, some of the same kind of things that you're bringing up. Okay, and I think we're trying to find options to get back to where we can address those things, still provide safety to the community, but we have to also recognize that we are responsible for the safety of all the community. And that's all the way down to homeless. I mean, we have to take our responsibilities strongly, and we have to address things and address those things when they happen. And I think that the communities that's what they're looking for. I think they're looking for, as I said before, is more of that keeping the peace, guardian approach, not to let up. And again, not to let up. There are people that need to be arrested and go to jail. But there are a lot of folks that there are other alternatives. And if we can find some alternatives, when we have 7.2 million people in prison today in the United States of America, and or in the correctional system and all together, and they're full. So people come in, they go out the back. I mean, that's what we have to find, a different way of approaching things. It's one of the things that I won't get into it because that's teaching community corrections, but we have to find different ways to do it. I know that. I know when I went into Visalia, when I went back to Visalia, California as the chief of there, because we had some issues in management, but we also had some issues with gangs. That's not a big issue here, it doesn't appear. But the reason I bring it up is because we had almost 100 drive-by shootings and 12 murders the first year I went back. And we had a lot of enforcement. We were putting a lot of folks in jail at the time, but it wasn't doing a bit of good. It wasn't until we got groups like this group here, and we had the lead agencies of the district attorney, the chief of police, the head of probation, the various community members that needed to be a part of that process, that we formed a gang task force, not to arrest people, but to find alternatives to get the youth so that we don't have this continuing cycle. And the only thing I will say about that is after 4 years, we dropped that to 12 drive-bys and 1 homicide. But it wasn't because of the arrests. It was because what we did and different programs we did in the community. So community programs work. And I think if we as a police department or as an agency have to look at that. It doesn't mean we still don't do effective law enforcement. It's just that we expand our view. We expand our paradigm of what we have to do to make sure that this works. And I think it has to work because you see it across the nation. I mean, that's what you see in most places in this country. What was your second question?
Commissioner Schneider, yes, I appreciate your answer. I wanted to hear about how we meaning me, anyone here in the Trust Commission or residents can be part of the stakeholder group that gets to do some additional question making.
That begins tonight. And getting your input. One of the things that we will do is, and again, this has to be designed at the city hall level as to what this process will be. But the first night that we come down here is we do an open community meeting. And we do that with the intention of letting you to meet these folks. I mean, actually meet them. I'm not saying I just prayed them through. I mean, we're talking about you meeting them, asking them some questions, asking them some questions that are very important to you, and get the responses. Normally, what we do is we have some feedback forms from that meeting that everybody at that meeting, if they choose to do, can fill in these feedback forms for the city manager, so that can weigh into his decision in the end. That's one way that we can do it. Others, when they develop the community, obviously there's only a certain amount of number we can actually put into the process. But that'll be up to the city manager. Whether there's a couple people on this commission that would be in there, I don't know. But that's one other option as well. But those are basically the various options that you have to get involved at that point.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
And there might be others that the city manager will present. I just don't know at this point.
Great.
And I don't think he does either, because I don't think we've really talked about it too much, other than what his expectations are.
Thank you.
Commissioner Black. Oops, sorry.
Hi, thank you. I have one question and 2 comments. First question, you said, sir, that you were meeting with stakeholders and that you had read the Jensen Hughes report. And I'm wondering what questions and interviewees are you asking and interviewing that are different from the Jensen and Hughes report? Are there different stakeholders and different questions? Can you gain some different insight than what the Jensen Hughes report offered?
Well, I would say to you that I don't know who they interviewed, okay, altogether. The city manager, this is probably one of the more extensive stakeholder schedules I've ever done. I mean, we're really, it's all day and into tonight and all day tomorrow into the evening of different people that I meet for a half hour to 45 minutes. It's very extensive in that regard. The city manager would have to give you some answers on that because I don't know exactly who they talked to. Our role here, though, is really to get, we've read that report. Now I want to talk to people here. You obviously are very interested. You've read the report. You folks are very invested or you wouldn't be on this commission. And so that's the importance of me getting this feedback tonight. And I don't know if you were part of that too, each one of you, but if you weren't, this is your option to weigh in too.
Excellent. And my two comments as far as what qualities am I looking for in the next Loveland police chief? As a citizen, I would like a police chief that is a leader and that understands that the buck stops with them and takes responsibility when its department fails its community. I did not see that with our last police chief, and I won't trust a new incoming police chief until they take responsibility and publicly and formally say that the police department failed in the Karen Gardner case. Every police officer that was involved in that failed, and the city failed to take care of that. The police department failed to address that properly. I won't trust an incoming police chief unless they acknowledge that publicly. Two, I would like to see in the next police chief a role model and a morale booster. We have a morale problem, I believe, in this police department, as well as many others nationwide. And I feel like it's going to be imperative that this individual not only model behavior, model the exact communication style they would like for their officers to have, model the exact engagement style with the community that they would like to see their officers engage in, and be a great listener, because you can ask a group of stakeholders over and over and over what they'd like to see, and it doesn't matter if you're not listening and modeling that and taking responsibility for it. I appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you for your input.
Commissioner Vick?
Just because I'm with Natalie and Mike, but our time, are we gonna move the agenda time? Because we're at 7:20, aren't we? So I didn't know. We're just gonna keep on this thread.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So when he said he had more meetings tonight, he has one at 8 o'clock tonight.
Okay.
So I just wanted to mention, so we don't get caught not having enough time for everybody to have had a chance to
Very
comment.
good. No comments. Just one question. What does your organization think about chief of police being heavily involved in politics?
I'm sorry, what did you say again?
What does your organization think about chief of police being heavily involved in politics?
I don't think they should be, if you're wanting my answer to that. I think a police chief has to have good political acumen, but needs to be apolitical. Okay? And there's a difference in the two. I think the police chief has to understand that when there are impacts to the community, and not just the police chief, but all the way down to the officers and the staff, they need to understand when something is going to rise to the level of community concern, that number one needs to be addressed. And that has to be done. And a chief needs to be able to be apolitical. And when I mean that, he needs to be able to go to the city manager and say, we need to take care of this. You know, the city manager, he or she, the chief of police, he or she is directly responsible to the city manager, the community as well. But from a line of reporting, that's where that has to go. And I think going around that or being political and trying to cut corners and try to build a silo for yourself. You know, in this business years and years ago, when we first started on the East Coast, I think there was a lot of that. And over years and years, that's kind of gone away. But I don't think, to answer your question, I don't believe a police chief needs to be political. They need to be apolitical and have good political acumen. Does that answer your question? Okay.
We are at the time that we requested from you. Would you like to continue speaking with us?
As long as I can, as long as it's with the city manager. Like I say, I have to meet with the police department at 8 o'clock, but I'm yours until I can get over there by 8 o'clock. So I would say by 7:45.
Okay, so we have on our list really quick. Up next, we had Commissioner Stoddard, Commissioner Hildebrand, Commissioner Dreith, and Commissioner Bullard. If we can go like, that'd be good. Does that make sense? I know it wasn't real words, but just go quickly with your comments and let's get through this real quick so we can answer the rest of that. So Commissioner Stoddard.
Thank you. Do you do a psychological profile on the candidates?
There will be one done on the final candidate. All right. So if the city wanted to include that, they could do so, and we'd have to get someone that could get the instrument and do it. We don't typically do that. We could accommodate getting that done if we wanted to work with the city manager on that. What we do in that regard is obviously when we have candidates, then our office starts doing a thorough search. They go through court issues. They look for online. They look for newspaper clippings, issues that are going to demonstrate perhaps a propensity for something that we don't want here, and so we do that. And then we ask the city if they want to do a Sterling. We use a Sterling to do kind of a preliminary background that identifies, do they have the certifications they're talking about, the education, do they have any arrests, do they have the certification for education, those kind of things. But once we have some folks that are selected, then the city manager can decide whether he wants to do 2 background investigations or whatever. Normally they give a conditional job offer first, but they go through a very thorough background and psychological and physical. Some states require a polygraph, like Washington. I don't know if we require a polygraph here for the chief or not, but some states do, some states don't.
Particularly interested in leadership style. And then just a couple of quick comments. I think that most people involved in leadership understand that there's no limit to what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. I would be particularly interested in the candidates having a good track record of developing others.
Okay.
Commissioner Hildebrand Shell.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate this. But so I had one question and one comment.
Okay.
But the question, well, maybe I'll make my comment first because the question will make more sense. But so I hear a lot about the segment that is mistrustful here in Loveland. And I feel like, so I'm part of the Hispanic community. I'm also part of the segment that has been not victimized, but my life is it's kind of turned upside down from policies in the police department, and was very vocal. And every time I speak out, I freak out because it's scary in this community. And I feel like, so when you go to these stakeholders, my comment is just, I want to tell you that segment of us, the small segment, there's a lot of us. and especially the Hispanic community. So it's important to me, but I wanted you to hear that loud and clear, that it's like we're only like 12% on our consensus, on our census, but I don't know how accurate that actually is. But I just wanted to make that clear.
Well, I want you to know that we, first and foremost, as I mentioned when I started, we as a law enforcement agency, if we're not representing all people, we're failing. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, as part of our process, and this is again is up to the city, but I believe they're going to want us probably to expand our search and people that we contact, such as the Latino Police Officers Association, Latina Executive Latina Police Officers Association, as well as people of color, LGBTQ+. We hit all those different areas because we want to see what's out there and who's out there, and we're going to choose the very best person. that we can for the organization. And so that's going to be part, I would assume, part of our process to make sure that we meet some of those groups. The city manager probably hasn't made that final decision yet, but that's something that he can do. But if we're not meeting a segment of the community, especially the underrepresented segment of the community, then we're not meeting our job. We're not doing our job the way we should be doing it. And so I would think that any chief, and I will make a note of that too, we'll talk about that. All right.
And my actual question was, so I mentioned how I was, don't always agree with the policies we have, but when I was doing my research, one of the big things where they were saying is certain types of personalities will look for different policies in a police department, and there'll be some policies that attract more aggressive policing, and then other policies that'll discourage the aggressive policing. And I was wondering if you were aware of any, I don't even know if you know all of our police policies, but if we have any policies that might be red flags for attracting a more aggressive police style, or if we have policies that are going to attract that more community-minded police.
I think the report that was done by the outside agency, I think it identified some issues. I know it did. You know, with regard to use of force issues, that this isn't just Loveland either. This is what they recommended is utilized in a lot of agencies today with regard to recognizing the importance of life, those kind of things. I think there's some things that come across as being somewhat hard, especially, you know, it can be slogans, that sort of thing. Some of those things I think the organization has to look at, and the next chief has to look at and identify. You know, one of the things that we've had to do over the years, and there's reasons for it, but it really became more evident after 9/11, and that is we saw a militarization, what people perceived a militarization of police. And I was a part of a SWAT team way back. And I was on the hostage negotiation team. But our role there, our chief made it very clear that when we went out, because we had to put on all that gear, you know, the helmets and all that sort of thing. When we went out to do the call, we would resolve the issue and get back in our van and get off the street and get back into our blues, all right, that we would represent the keeping the peace role type of a thing. Well, after 9/11, we saw that, you know, obviously there was a concern, you know, to arm your officers to make sure that they provide the safety. But as a result of that, when we have all the vests, and I'm not saying we do away with that, but the perception of the community is to understand why they do that. Because it really appears that we've all kind of dressed like SWAT officers now. You know, we have the big vests, we have the knives, we have the guns, we have the tasers, we have everything. They all have a reason. But the point is, what is the perception of the community? And when we get into making arrests, what is the perception of the community? And I don't know that anybody has a great answer to how to resolve that, because we do have to provide the safety. I know that the president recently said, well, we won't be utilizing certain military equipment anymore. I think that may be one way that they're trying to address it, but I think we have to go beyond that and try to figure out, all right, but do we need to educate the community why we do that? And then those that aren't involved in straight, you know, working the street, you know, maybe we dress a little bit differently, and, you know, I'm not sure what the answers are there, but I know that was one of the things that over time that kind of gave the police department a harder look. Same people, but now, you know, it's kind of the military appearance, not military appearance, but the SWAT appearance on everybody does tend to have a militarization approach, and or at least a perception. And I think that's having an impact. Answer your question?
Commissioner Drythe?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Mine's primarily just a comment, and it parallels somewhat along Commissioner Rick's comment. In a new police chief, I feel very strongly that they have to be a very strong person that understands the chain of command, that he works for the city manager, and that he will have to be really strong to stand up to individuals on city council. He does not work for them. They should not be directing him. I love the fact you think that visibility is very important, being out in the community. Also, perception. Perception is utmost importance. I know police chiefs work hard. They deserve their time off. But when they're on their time off, in order to give the proper perception, they need to be very careful about who they choose to spend their time off with. They could better spend it visibility in the community, doing things other than kowtowing to counselors. Thank you.
Commissioner Bullard?
Thank you. I'd like to second Commissioner Hildebrand Schell's comment about inclusivity. That's just, terrifically important, especially in Loveland, I think. But two qualities. One is because there's a difference between people who can get out in the community and people who are a people person. Because I've known people who are leaders who are people persons. They have less difficulty in communicating and listening to other people. So I think that's very important, as opposed to somebody who really is very comfortable sitting beside the desk or going to meetings. And I'm going to close with something that's pretty difficult, because I think in the last 2 weeks, our country has changed, and it has to do with gun violence, or I would prefer that we say gun accountability, but we don't seem to be accountable. But I think sensitivity to those populations which may be at greater risk, being sensitive in terms of how people are feeling with their grief, and being able to come right out and be clear about, this is what happened, this is what we're going to do, which we did not see a couple of weeks ago.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Swiger, I see you, but Aaron, could you go first? I saw your hand up first.
Yes, I just had a follow-up to Commissioner Hildebrand Schell. I'm not sure if I understood your answer to her question when she asked you about if our police department's policies tend to attract the more militaristic, aggressive style, or if it's attracting that guardianship that you mentioned, type of leadership and philosophy for policing. I'm not sure if I got the answer to that or not.
Well, I don't know that I can provide you an answer to it without going through the policy. I would be hesitant to do so. I would say this. I would say that the study demonstrates that there's some things that need to be addressed within the policy, and I would think that the next chief will need to go through with staff and the appropriate city attorney and HR, all those different folks, to make sure that it represents the kind of policies that will work in Loveland. I think that has to be done. I think that study is a good roadmap for the next chief coming in. I mean, I certainly would look at it and represent it. And it does address a lot of things regarding policy. So I can't say to you that I understand that whether it's too hard or too soft, because I don't know that much about that policy without going through each one of those. And of course, that's not what we've been tasked to do. But I would say the next chief should be aware that that exists, and they should do that and take that into account, and probably come and listen to this commission when they get here, so they know exactly what they ought to be looking for.
Thank you.
You bet.
Commissioner Swiger?
I will be brief. Thank you for coming, and I wanted to just point out that we are a commission that has been looking at the police department and the trust issue that the community has, and we've been talking to people in our community for almost a year now. And I just want to respectfully emphasize to you that the words that my fellow commissioners are saying come from a place not only of heart, but these have been thought out, and they are the result of our studies in the community. And I might recommend that even when you're done here, you might pull up this meeting and go through them again, hearing the commissioners' comments. They are very, very significant, and my feeling is they really do represent our community more so than I think you're going to get from a lot of other groups. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I think how much time do we have left, Mr. Adams, or should we let him go?
Thank you, Madam Chair. He has about 6 more minutes and then he needs to leave. And unless you want him to leave now, if you're done or feel like everybody's had their say, it's up to you.
All right. Would you like to ask any more of your questions?
Well, I think
Or
you've
have
really
we
gone
covered
over a lot of what I was after. These questions were really provided so that you would start thinking about what to talk about here. What I want to impart to you is this. In looking at the police department and looking at its history, I think you have a good organization. You have an organization, though, that certainly have to have some things addressed, without a doubt. I mean, and they know that. They recognize that. They tell me that as well. So, I mean, I think they're open to it. I really do. And I really think you're gonna go forward. This is a hard time. Obviously, it's been a hard time, and not living it with you. I'm not speaking from experience there, but looking at how that impacted and some of the things that I read and that sort of thing, I can recognize that how that's had an impact on this community. This is a critical decision. This is a tremendously critical decision. We have to get this right. We can't get this wrong. And I recognize that. The city manager recognizes that, and you recognize that. That's why you're here tonight. And we're going to do our very best, and we will bring the very best we can. And if it doesn't fit the community, we'll do it again. We don't want to, because it takes time and we need to get things going. It needs to be right the first time if possible. Most of the times it is, but it's not unheard of to, when you get to one of these things, maybe folks just don't come out the way that you thought that they were going to come out. And if that's the case, there should be no hesitation. But we do need to get it right. And I think we're going to. And I'm very, very encouraged by the fact that you're taking your time to do this. That you're all busy folks, and this is your community. You want to get it right. So I don't think that, again, I don't think we're sidestepping anything here. I think the city really wanted to do this. As I said, this is the most extensive stakeholder meeting sessions for 2 days that I've seen a city want. So it's very apparent that we'll be there. Now, of course, if there's any other questions, you can always get a hold of email or something of that nature. City Hall will have that. And you're welcome to do that if you need to have any questions, or perhaps you want to talk further about something that's bothering you in that regard. I'm more than happy to listen. And as we move forward,
Can we have one more question?
of course we can.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you. I just got one quick question. Would you be interested in applying for this job?
Yeah. Well, I've done a lot of years. But it's the reason I stay in this business, because these are such important decisions, and I want to make sure we get it right, and I want to make sure that you get it right, and that's why I do it, and I'm happy doing it. So it's very rewarding to go into organizations, and I do, that have had some issues. I know of another issue had something very similar to this, that was a shooting, and we got the right person in there, and it's really made a difference in that organization. And that is where the reward is, to see that the community is moving forward and to see that the department is moving forward. And that's our goal. Okay. City Manager, Mr. Adams, unless you have anything else for me, I will go to the police department.
I'll let you. I have just a couple of quick comments, if I could.
Yes.
So I didn't speak in the beginning because I didn't want to say anything that would influence what you said. And so you all have really hit the ball out of the park here. I really appreciate all your comments and your thoughtfulness. Part of what he said is, I didn't give him, this is the ideal candidate for police chief. I didn't give him anything. accept some general guidance, because I wanted him to develop the job description after being in this community and talking to all the folks in this community and seeing what this community needs. And so that's the approach I've taken here. And it takes more time. It takes more effort to bring him in earlier, have him extend his stay longer to make sure that he has a chance to visit with everyone. So I appreciate your feedback here, as it has been. He's already seen the PCAB. He'll be going back to see the police department again tonight, the ones that are on different shifts, to make sure he gets a chance to talk to the officers. The other thing too is regarding all the other different agents, BIPOP and all that. We already talked about, there are websites for those particular groups at the national association level that give us access to candidates, and and I will be authorizing them to use that for its additional money, but it's money, in my view, well spent to do that. It's not often, not everybody does that, but we think it's important in our community now with our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging initiative. How else could you do that but do that? So that's another thing that we will be working on here. And then the finalist process, selection process that goes on when they come back with the finalists, we're still working on that, but Prothman is the ones that found us our new fire chief. And we got a heck of a fire chief here, and that's why I picked them to help us with the police chief, because I think their philosophy of finding somebody and wanting to make sure the right fit is important is what we're looking for, and that's what I'm glad that we were able to get somebody that's as experienced to this to help us with this process. So that when that process rolls out, we'll be looking for opportunities to include you, not all of you, but boards and commissions, PCAB, and also the trust commission. So give us some, it's not going to happen tomorrow. We don't have to worry about it. I have a little bit of time to get that planned out for the next step when they're back, but it'll be a few months from now for sure. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, commissioners. Those of you that are remote, those in the audience, thank you very much for taking your time tonight to listen to me. And we'll see you again before this is all done. I can assure you that. And again, if you have anything further you want to add, please feel free to get my email, and I have that there, and we can address things with that regard. Thank you very much.
Okay, so next we have the city manager report.
So thank you, Madam Chair. When we talked about this before, I wasn't quite sure what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do something, and then you're going to tell me, of course you will, if I hit the mark or not. So my job was to tell you things that are going on that might affect trust and things that you should know about, or follow-ons to things that you've been participating in. The first one was that we are still wanting to get on the agenda of this board to finish off our discussion about a community service award. And so we had sent out some information initially on that. I just wanted to put that plug out there. We know it's not done yet. We know we need to come back to you. I have a PowerPoint presentation ready to go, but at the appropriate time when this commission feels ready to do that, I'm prepared to give that information and receive more feedback from the group. The other part of that too is I had a chance to meet with our police department last week with all of the lieutenants that you got a chance to meet with that were part of the Jensen and Hughes 5 formational groups. And they came back and have given a preliminary outbrief of what they have found and what they're still needing and what information is there. So we spent probably 6 hours on that process last Thursday, and we'll have more to do on that. But I did appreciate, and they were very appreciative of the comments they received from this board particularly, and the active involvement that you were in that, giving information, giving your thoughts and opinions on what's going on. And as I've talked before, this is a first step in this process. We know that they've got more work to do to bring this back up. And then we're trying to find a time. Again, we'll be trying to get on the schedule here. And I know you're going to talk about this later about special meetings and how that's going to work with our schedule in the months of June, because we have Juneteenth Day, and then in July 4th is on a Monday. So when would be a good time for us to come back with the police department to kind of just brief you on where we are right now? Of course, we're not finalized. We've got to go back out into our community as well. But they wanted to start with the Trust Commission and PCAB to come back and brief on results. So that is still here to do, and we know that is the next step coming forward. We also did some library work with a library group, the Harwood Institute, trained library staff did some work in March, and we're working on that report to be released out to the community as well. And that's the one that was attended by about 30 or so people. So that one we know is still something to be done. We also had some community outreach events. Our police chief, for the first time, a police chief did a fireside chat at the Foundry Plaza. We have never done that before. We only had 4 people show up, but it's the first of many, we hope. And it's a new way where he just was there to talk. And so we're learning, as our community's learning, different ways that we can reach out to people. And it's not the number that matters, but the feedback that you get when you're there. So we have more commitment to work on that and other things of outreach that Nicole has been working with our police department about other events and so forth that we want to do. And the other thing that we're working on is diversity, inclusion, and belonging and equity, because today, in addition to kicking off our police recruiting process with the city, we also have our consultant on that. CPS HR is our consultant, and they started today outreaching to our groups and small stakeholder groups. We have done a survey with our staff already on their feelings about this particular topic, comfort levels, concerns they have. And then the next step was to have these small focus groups where we could talk about it in a smaller group facilitated by this company who does this around the United States. And then from there will come some training that they'll develop based upon our needs as a city of Loveland, and work that training into our schedule here as a next step. So they're here today and tomorrow also in small groups working through this process. And so we're excited about that. It's something that we haven't started yet. This is our first step into this particular area. And so again, I can keep you informed after that process is over in the next couple of days, kind of some of the things we'll be looking at as next steps in that area. So those were kind of the highlight of things. I wasn't sure where to start or end, but if there's other things that you feel that you would need to know, I'm certainly here to answer any question I can.
It has not been released, and it is not, as far as we can tell, ready in the near future. There was a delay in the court process, personal issues with the attorney on the plaintiff side or the appellant, and so I'm talking about this is the Ash case that is related to this
The Ash,
issue.
and that case was, remind me again.
It was an officer who was alleged to have accessed records related to the Karen Garner case.
After the Karen Garner case became public.
Yes.
And after litigation. I've never quite understood the connection or how you're crafting the connection. So if you could just expand on that so that we can then follow that case, because I think you're, as you know, city attorney, you know that I think your view is overly expansive, and I think that you're protecting someone, and that creates distrust. So I think the more information you can provide so that we can understand what your legal theory that would be assisting. I am really hoping to hear something so that I can make sense out of this, but so far I just can't, because it sort of sounds like anything in the world that you can create as a connection will delay the release of the report. And I think it's important for you to educate this group on your thinking, and you can do that. That if there's a legitimate basis for you holding back that report, and I think it's you. I think it's your decision. You are the one holding back the report. I'm not sure that Mr. Adams even understands the argument. So if you could shed some light on that, because I think that, there are a lot of I'm not a trusting person, but there are a lot of trusting people on this commission. And I want you to show how a lawyer can be trustworthy by providing the explanation that people deserve, because it seems extremely attenuated to me. And people are blindly going along with it. So just help us out with the argument about how that's possibly related.
She's not alone.
Meyer? So I want to start by, it was our expectation that this would be completed and all wrapped up in March. Everything would be out to the Trust Commission, to the public. This has not been any effort by the city attorney's office, by our outside counsel to delay this process. This is simply something, the human condition. We had the appellant, who is the appellant's attorney. So Mr. Ash's attorney became ill. He had to request extensions from the court because he was ill. And it is his recovery, after his recovery, that gets everything back on track.
Okay,
So
but
step one.
You're avoiding my question.
Yeah, well, I'm going to get that. But step one is you have to understand that, we have not in any way delayed this report. We're simply waiting for the appeal to be done. Now, you're asking, well, how is this tied to the appeal? I think that's what your question is. This has to do with due process. This isn't from the city's perspective, the city could release that, but you have an employee who has filed a case, who is alleging that the information contained may not be correct. And you don't want to put out a report that's going to prejudice that employee's rights until there's been a decision by a judge that says whether the report and the facts alleged there are correct or not.
Explain that more. I can follow you a little bit, but I think that you can elaborate a little bit more because so due process, and the city uses that term a lot. And I think one of the things that's important for people to understand is due process doesn't have anything to do with our citizens, our status as citizens. Due process has to do, in the context that you guys are talking about it, with an employee's rights and the city as the employer. But the city also includes all of us and all the connections, so that you have to, help us understand, because at the end of the day, you're connecting a case that of an employee, I think, that was seeking information, and you're connecting that to information about a whole other operation. And not to bring up what happened in Texas, but can you imagine if the city of Loveland was hiding information about the murder of children because they're worried about not even one of the cops that were involved in, not going in or whatever the thing is, but like a document request of one of the other officers. It would just be so bizarre for those citizens, and that would be national news. And you're kind of doing the equivalent. So I don't understand. He made a document request, I'm gathering, about the case, and you can't talk. So you can't, and I can't make your argument for you. It doesn't. I mean, do any of you understand? Maybe let's try this. Moses just explained it. Can anyone here explain?
This to me means this person, you can't request stuff when a case is being gone over and expect them to give you answers when the case isn't done. I mean, that doesn't.
But do you understand do you understand the document request case connection to the Garner case? Because you might know more about it.
Well, evidently the two are they must be intertwined or they wouldn't be doing this.
But how do we know that? And that's what I'm asking.
Commissioner Schultz.
Yeah, I, with respect to Commissioner Walsh, I think really that question is more for Moses than for us. And I think I'm perhaps more trusting than Commissioner Walsh on this, and will be okay to allow the process to play itself out. But I will say, from my personal position as a commissioner, I think my patience is getting a little bit worn thin. That I can respect that if that's your legal opinion, and I understand that cities generally are risk averse, and I understand all of that. But I think at some point I'd like to put a period at the end of the sentence and just get that information, and I'll leave it at that. And I would like to just say, I think we should probably move on because we do have some other items, but I don't want to diminish or minimize that, because I I want to get that information too, for our work.
So I have Commissioner Black and then Commissioner Barrett. Commissioner Black.
I have one quick comment on that, and then I do have a question for city manager regarding his report. I agree with Commissioner Walsh. I don't understand the connection, and I want that on record that me personally, as a citizen, I don't see the connection between a records request by an employee who wasn't even involved in the Karen Gardner case. So for the record, I don't understand that connection either, and I guess we'll see when it does come out how that was connected, and we'll have a better understanding. For the city manager, you spoke about meeting with the PD's 5 lieutenants who were heading up the 5 assessment groups last week for about 6 hours or so. I guess I wanted to find out from you, are you pleased with what they came back with? Number one, or was there something missing that you requested for them to go back on? And secondly, who approves those final PD requests? Is that city council or is that you, city manager? Thank you.
So thank you, Commissioner. I think the question that's there is who approves the requests? Are you talking about the personnel requests that have been discussed as part of the development of the response to the Jensen Hughes report? When you say requests, is that what you're asking for?
Yes, because there'll be specific recommendations for those made by the PD. I'm assuming from what I remember from those meetings.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the different staffing requests that they have right now. They are working on job descriptions and other information as to how those would contribute to what they see as the police department reorganized a little bit more moving forward. And so right now that is, we're looking at a time period where we might do a supplemental appropriation, which is a way for us to request funding outside of the normal budget year. And so some of these requests we think may be more urgent than others because we do have a new chief coming on and he may have or she may have other ideas. So we're still, I'm needing more information to understand all of that better. And that's what one of the areas that we talked about. I think they did a terrific job and they got great feedback from the community. There are some other areas, and it was pointed out, and I'm trying to remember which one asked it, one of you. There are embedded, in addition to the recommendations that are in the report, there are other questions that were brought up by the Jensen Hughes report that are nested inside the text of the report. And there must, by my count, there's only over 40 of them. And so the chief now is working with the team to go back through the report and find those other areas that somebody had, I think maybe Tara's you, wasn't it? Okay. And making sure that those particular items, I heard some of them addressed in their comments because of some of the recommendations that were coming out of the group. And there are others that still yet to need to be talked about. And so I want to make sure those are part of the report too as well. And so that's the next step of what they're working on now. So that's some of the area, but I think from where we are now, a lot of ground covered in just a couple of months. So I'm very pleased with that and appreciate their efforts and the community's efforts in supporting that. No, we're not done yet, but it's a good start.
So can I follow up with a question? So the chief is going through that and getting a group together to work on the other recommendations that were embedded in the text. Are they doling them out to those 5 assessment groups once they deem what heading that comes under, or are they just working as a small group together on those? Are they getting other feedback?
Thank you, Commissioner. What we're trying to do is keep them in the same, we feel that these are all can be fitted into one of the 5 areas, and using the expertise that's been developed not only by the lieutenants, but the sergeants and the staff that were involved in those groups, coming out with additional information and recommendations after they've finished that. So it's trying not to start over again with different groups, but to use the groups that we have, because they have a lot of background information that you all
So can I ask specifically, did they bring up the issues that were in the community perspective section of the Jensen Hughes report, specifically bias and aggressive enforcement?
Those were discussed, and also to thank you for reminding me on something. You had a question earlier about what kind of officers do you seek? And are there policies or procedures that encourage one type of officer versus another? So if you recall, one of the areas that Jensen Hughes was saying is you need to change your mission statement. You also need to look at your mission statement from a perspective of the difference between a warrior and a guardian. And I'm using guardian as a new term, but I think that's what we were trying to describe earlier. Is there a way that that can be clarified? And I'm not sure that you need to change the people you get. I think you need to change the way that they're trained and the way that they respond to the community. And that's where we want to focus in on some of the discussion that the group recommended there, because there were some very good ideas about how to go about that change. And also the fight, survive piece versus listen and respond. So I think there are a lot of areas that you talked about already that have been with them as well. So that's in there too as well. But yes, those were part of the area we talked about, but that's not the only place that it's on page 18 and 19 of the report. There's other areas too that have other topics that we're looking at.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Barrett.
Just briefly, thank you, Madam Chair. My comment is for Mr. Garcia. I want you to know that after you told us that the IA investigation was not going to be released because of the Ash case, I ran into the HR leader for the police, the LPD HR person at a meeting, and explained to her what you had said. She was incredulous. She did not understand the connection. She probably does now. Hopefully she came and talked with you about it. But if nobody understands that, I just want to say that I think you're missing a really good opportunity to restore and improve trust in Loveland by not being completely forthcoming about how that's connected and why you can't release that report now. That's all. Thanks.
Okay. Let's keep going. We switched the survey update to be next. So Commissioner Barrett, will you give us a quick update?
So the update on the project survey is handed out. I handed out to everybody. This is as of yesterday morning, I believe. There were 119 respondents. The results for question 2 on the departments were that there is distrust in LPD, city council, and/or leadership, trust in the fire department, parks and recreation, and about an equal split in utilities, roads and transportation, and in the other category. Being half of the people trust it, half of the people don't. The specifics on the results for question 3, there is some distrust in the city attorney's office, in the city manager, in city council, economic development, other departments, and some people said all, there's distrust in all, and then some people reiterated the trust or lack of trust in the police. The themes that are coming out, and I have no idea, I know that this is the order that it was given to me. I suspect it's because that was the order that they wrote them down, not necessarily that there were a higher number of respondents. I don't know. So I've asked them to give us percentages in future reports, if they can, how many people are saying release the IA reports, how many people are saying, whatever the issue is. But they are going to be looking for themes for us and reporting those to us once a week. There is some concern that releasing this to the public every week could skew the results. I didn't understand that concern. I wanted to throw it out to you to see if there's some discussion about that. And then finally, on events, we were at the farmers market yesterday, Commissioner Swiger and Commissioner Schneider and I. And we probably engaged with about 100 people who either took a card or came and learned about what the Trust Commission was doing, or heard about the survey for the first time, or scanned the QR code with their smartphone without even asking. They knew exactly what to do. So we're looking forward to seeing how and if that impacts the results. We'll have that every Sunday. I sent out an email to the CTC email address. I'm hoping you're all on that address and that you have those emails coming to you, because it's the only way I can think of to keep the schedule fresh, is to have that one-on-one communication with you, not to start a communication of any kind that would violate open meeting laws, but to be able to tell you, this is a slot that's open. If you want it, please sign up for it. So that'll be coming from Survey or Schedule Genius, something like that, from me, and would like for you guys to take a look at that and sign up for some shifts. It's fun getting out to the community and talking to them about what we're doing, and they love hearing that we're working on putting more love in Loveland.
Commissioner Schneider and then Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, Commissioner Barrett. It was really fun to talk to the community, and I think, in the 2.5 hours, I think it was 2.5 hours I was there, a lot of people were really intrigued and were thanking the Trust Commission for what we are doing. So I want to extend that to every Trust Commissioner, that the community does value the work that you're doing. It doesn't always feel that way to me. So I wanted to let you know that people are saying that. I might have missed this, but I did not see the results from the survey yet. Is that something I should be aware of that I missed, or?
I handed it out tonight, so I will have to
Okay.
email you,
Okay.
Commissioner Black.
Great. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah. And it would be great to hear when we're going to receive those, what to look at. I'm really intrigued. I mean, I've been, contacted by community members the whole time I've been on the Trust Commission, asking for me to, exert a certain opinion or represent them in a certain way. And I always have to say, we're a big group, and I don't know how much time I'm going to have to hog to represent what you have to say. But I do, support you, reaching out to the group email. That's the question. What's going on with the group email? Jeffrey, I hope we can answer that. And yeah, just to, our community does want to see the work that we're doing, and I just want to see it too. Thanks.
And just real quick, I'm sorry. Yeah, one thing I forgot. We have Jen Castaneda here tonight from the Loveland Justice League, and she has invited us to participate in this coming Saturday's event, celebrating their first anniversary. Congratulations. I don't know if we have just a minute to let her talk about what she'd like to have us do there. It's entirely up to you, but she's actually wanting somebody to speak there and have a table there for us.
Commissioners, would vote really quick? Are we all accepting to have her speak? All in favor? All opposed? All right, could you welcome up?
Oh, yeah, I can. Yeah, thank you. I'm going up, but it's very slow. I just want to be able to see all your faces. Jen Castaneda, Ward 3. Thank you so much for inviting me to come tonight and to do a quick speak to you. We really want our community to understand the seriousness of what all of you are doing in our community, because we're doing it too, right? Loveland Justice League is here to serve our community, to be a voice for our community. And to advocate for our community. So that's really what we're doing. And in this public event is sort of a 5 for all. We are celebrating our 1-year anniversary, which occurred on May 1st. And then we are doing our second fundraising event, which will be to benefit the youth and families of Loveland. We want to provide connections for the summer for the youth, to them, help them refacilitate these relationships and connections with their community, to understand what's going on in their community and to educate them, but really to bring our community together. We've been
discombobulated the last couple of years with COVID. And our children have really suffered the consequences of this pandemic and how it has impacted our whole community. So we want to bring forth the children's voices on top of that. So we'll be having lots of activities for the youth at the event. And the event will have music, we'll have poetry readings, we'll have speakers, as well as activities for youth to get involved in. We've also included a treasure hunt for our local small businesses to get involved in. It's completely free, and most of them can be able to also reconnect with their community. We're driving traffic into their actual businesses through their doors. So that's really been exciting to do as well. So we just would love to invite you, to come. We would love to have maybe a speaker to speak for the entire commission. So maybe that's something, you would all have to decide what that looks like. But we would be interested in being able to incorporate everything that you guys have worked on, because it's a huge issue in our whole community, as you separate the divisions of issues, which there are. What happened to the microphone, but there it is. Hi. So anyway, if we would love to hear from you if that's something that you have an interest in. We would, be open to meeting with whoever is going to do that, and we can certainly meet by Zoom or in person to make those final decisions. So thank you so much for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Could you please give us the date again?
Yes, I can. So this is this Saturday, 6/11. It will be held at the Civic Park, Foot Lagoon, right outside here, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And so it should be a good time. I really appreciate your time tonight, and thank you for listening.
And when would you need an answer from us by?
Also great. By Wednesday or Thursday at the latest would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Saturday, it'll be fine.
I have on Sign Up Genius, the link to it is in all of your email accounts, I hope. And there's a spot for a speaker if somebody feels compelled to do that. But there's also 2 spots for a table, and we can get you the materials and the table and the chairs to table the event, as well as, and if anybody else wants to just come and participate or hand out survey cards for people to scan with a QR code. That would be another way to participate, as long as we don't have people gathering and talking amongst themselves. Thanks.
City Manager and then Commissioner Schultz.
Yes, thank you. So I just needed to check on the logistics. I don't know how many cards you have left. Do we need to print more cards? And two cards left? Okay. And then did your poster survive, or do we need to print out a new one? Oh, okay. Okay. So that's good. So we can print out more materials there. And tomorrow I'll have Nicole back, and we can find out where the status is of the cards that we talked about on both sides, English, Spanish, that stuff. So we'll find out and have that ready by Friday again.
Commissioner Scholl, is your comment directly related to this? Okay, please speak.
I just have a quick, just a comment or question. I think it's fine. I mean, I have no issue with if we attend and hand out and push the survey. Where I kind of start to get a little uncomfortable is when we're asking somebody to speak on behalf of the commission. And I don't think that's, and I think as individual citizens, we all have the right to attend. And I'm not, again, I don't have, it's not the issue. What the issue I have is I'm not comfortable kind of authorizing or allowing somebody to go and speak on our behalf. As part of that, but if it's a table with this express purpose of promoting participation in the survey, I think that's perfectly appropriate. So,
Commissioner Schneider.
Thank you. Yeah, I to follow up on what City Manager Adams just said. Yeah, apparently we need new cards. That would be great. If we could get cards printed with the website on the bottom. There was some concern expressed from certain residents that I spoke with about the QR code. They weren't familiar with them. They weren't comfortable with them. And so just having the website on there would be great. I think Commissioner Barrett and Swiger wrote it on all of the previous cards. So it'd be nice to have it printed. if we could also get an additional banner that says, let's talk Loveland, or do you live in Loveland? You know, that was the opening question when I was working with Patty at the farmer's market. That really engaged people. And I think having those additional, you know, eye catchers would be great. Also, my son, who's 6.5, really loves the spinny wheel that the city uses at the city booth to like engage children and parents, and certainly kids came up to eat candy and get candy out of our sucker bowl. But if we could also get something like that, which I think when I was doing that with just as a resident with my child last summer, I had to fill something out in order for him to spin the wheel. And that was a cool engagement tactic. So those are my requests. Thank you. Oh, also name tags. I think we need name tags. Thanks.
Will it show you? This is yours.
We have name tags. We also have the QR code or the URL getting on the cards. That's already taken care of.
All right, so, sorry. I think we need to have a motion as to whether we have a speaker or not and vote on it as a group. So does anybody feel strongly?
So I would make a motion that we agree that one person, if they want to, can go and speak just about the creation of the Trust Commission and invite people to go over to the survey table, nothing more, if that would be something that we'd like to do.
I'll second.
Okay, my thought was like more motion to have a speaker or not have a speaker, but I like, if everyone's okay with not having a speaker and just directing to the survey, is that good? Does anybody strongly feel that we need to speak? You do? Okay. No, I agree with that. Oh, okay. All right, so then we don't need a motion. We're good. So we will have somebody direct people to the survey booth, and we'll have the sign-up sheet. It's in our emails from Catherine. Yes. So we're doing, yes, do that, but we don't need a motion to do that. I was thinking that we needed a motion, sorry to clarify, that to have a speaker to speak just in general as it was written. But just to have somebody say, hey, go do the survey, great. We don't need to worry about this then. Sorry. Okay. Yes.
The Sign Up Genius that I got ended up in my spam. I found it, but if you're not seeing an email from Catherine with Sign Up Genius, check your junk mail.
Cool. Yes, please.
So on the question of the email, someone had asked me to clarify the email too. I actually don't think I saw an email. So I'll check my spam, and maybe if anyone is sending, so I get all the CTC facilitator emails, but the other one that gets used a little less, the Community Trust Commission email, I guess I would suggest, and I'm just sort of thinking out loud here, but if you send it to me, maybe also send me a note to say, double check you got this, because I didn't see that. So apologies if I wasn't sending something on.
Okay. All right, so Commissioner Walsh and Commissioner Scholl, would you speak on the Code of Ethics? I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Commissioner Bullard, sorry.
Thank you. Moving on, but just clarifying, do you have down having a table at Juneteenth?
I'm working on those this week.
Okay, because.
Two different events for Juneteenth.
Okay, yes, and of course, the Juneteenth event is on June 18th because it's on Saturday. Yeah, but there's one on Thursday, I think, too. But they would like, Heart and Soul would like you to fill out an application for the table, which has already been approved. And I can give that to you. Okay, just wanted to clarify that we're all
going to go look for somebody to talk to about that. So that's you.
Yeah, it is.
Could I please make a motion to extend the meeting by 15 minutes? Got a second? All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Okay. So really, we're going to go through the Code of Ethics discussion with Commissioner Scholl and Commissioner Walsh.
You want me to start? Yeah, my apologies that Commissioner Walsh was called out, but actually I had started the process and enlisted her advice, so I would correct our speaker earlier. I think it was probably both my response or my issue and hers as well. So I sorry, I was just relating to the public comment that we had earlier that you were called out specifically, and so I'll share the blame for that anyway. But so if I could, I just would like to just kind of go through a little bit of just kind of some reasoning and some rationale, and then kind of talk a little bit about kind of what it is and then some process. And I think part of it was, and I've been kind of contemplating kind of what we're doing and what are some of the nature of the issues and that we've been hearing, you know, related to city council and behavior and actions and not just the elected officials, but upper level management. And trying to think of kind of how we can kind of effectuate some type of change or have some influence on the process. And I thought part of it was, you know, what I always look at when I address a problem is trying to kind of understand what the finish line looks like and kind of what that end looks like. And what I kind of felt was it's important if we're going to demand that there be some kind of trusting behavior that we define what that is and that we be able to put that in writing and be able to share it and make that a part of public service in the city of Loveland. And so I did a little bit of research and, you know, this kind of code of ethics, I will say it's not unique to Loveland. Lots of communities have something like this or similar. And I cobbled together this as a draft from a lot of those communities. So this isn't anything new or groundbreaking. And so I felt like from a process standpoint, it would be important to put something on paper that people can react to. And I put it down as a draft. And when I'd sent it to Jeffrey, you know, I was very clear that it would be, we would have it on the agenda as a discussion item, you know, because I don't want to be presumptuous that this is the language that people would gravitate or support, and that we're open to the idea that through discussion we can perfect something or and make it better before we make a recommendation, if that is in fact the course of this body. And in through that process, I enlisted Commissioner Walsh because of her experience and to get her feedback and based on her background, and just to you know, to see if this was an idea that was worth pursuing and thinking about. And so again, and you know, in going through that, and with respect to the kind of comments from the speaker before, you know, I think it's important that we think about what it is, what are the behaviors that we want to see in our public officials in Loveland. And I included, there's a couple things I want to point out. There's a few things. I didn't just include city council because I think we have an executive level staff that are very well compensated, some of which are in this room today, that oversee millions, tens of millions of dollars of public contracts, public spending, and decisions that affect our lives every day. And I think they are just as equally as important and influential as the city council people. And I think it's important that we that as public leaders, that they recognize and participate in this as well. And I also think that to answer kind of one of the questions, it's not intended to necessarily be punitive and just say that, but the way it's written is you acknowledge that you've seen it and that there's a process in defined behavior, that expectations, and then if you don't meet that, there's a process by which that can be addressed. And I think, you know, I recognize that within the context of some of the city employees, there's probably some legal perfecting that will need to take place. And within the context of the city council folks, I mean, there's also some legal perfecting that probably, if we are to recommend that and if they are to take it up to city for consideration at city council. You know, and the other thing, just real quick, and then I'll stop and I'll allow Commissioner Walsh to kind of add any of her comments. One of the things when I looked at the city of Loveland, because part of it, I want to say, what do we have in place? And I looked, and I couldn't find anything. And it's not to say that there isn't anything there, It's just the fact that everything is disparate. There's a piece of a conflict of interest in the city charter. There's a administrative regulation that applies to city employees that's not easily accessible. There's other pieces. There's the code of there are a lot of different things that apply to different groups or universes of people that are affiliated with the city, but there's no clear statement of what it means, the ethical statement of what it means, to be a public official in the city. And so that's why I took that step, and again, I think Commissioner Walsh was gracious enough to kind of to work with me and help. So I'll turn it if you have anything to add to that before we.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we won't talk about the stuff that we got today since it was dated today, I guess, but I printed out the references in the city attorney's email to you. I think it was. I got a little confused by that. And it is it's all over the board. And then he kind of mixed in the state statutes that were guidance, and we'd need to understand from him what that means by guidance. Both of those statutes were actually updated since the link that there's like a 2017 link, but it's actually been updated in 2018. So there's some things like that, but the easiest way for people to comply with things is when it's can be found and it's understandable and it's in one place. And I think a lot of the distrust in the community, to tell you the truth, has to do with not knowing what our code says and what rules people are supposed to be following and if they are. And so I thought this was a really great solution. I also thought it really, again, was the end result, which is why I was happy to see Mike's email. I thought that was the end result of everything we've been talking about with the problem with the Garner case. Because it does come down to communication, and it comes down to how people communicate. And, if there was a code of ethics, most professions have codes of ethics. I don't think you can hold elected officials to codes of ethics. I think an elected official can put the employees at risk, and it's extremely unfair. But that's not something, you can't fire a public official for compromising an employee. The employee really carries the brunt of that act. And so one would hope that, there would be enough respect and all those kind of soft issues, so that a public elected official doesn't do that to an employee. But there are certain codes of ethics, there are certain ethics that you can hold a public official to. And certainly the city staff and the commissions, the best way, whenever, I did actually, Linda kind of forewarned me that I was, she didn't like the idea. But when I read a provision, your mind sort of naturally goes to how you think, how's this gonna be, how would I use this, or how would someone use this against me? But I read it, I do a different thing. I say, I'll go in someone else's shoes. I'll go in Merlin's shoes. And because I know we disagree on pretty much everything, but still like the guy. But, so I would go, how would this work for Merlin? And I think if you think of ethics that way, I think when you read it, enough with the details, and there's a whole bunch of things that we probably can smooth out and expand on and stuff like that. But just as a concept, do you want your city council to be, it's pretty slim. The ethical obligations under the city
very slim
charter are very slim. It's sort of like, you can't write yourself a check or, something like that. But do you want your city council to have more ethical obligations? Do we want, and ethics also, it's not just it creates an accountability, it gives our city staff protection because they can say, I have to because it's right here on the code of ethics. Don't come in here and tell me to, you want me to, you're twisting my arm to do X or Y. So it's a loving thing to have ethics. That's how you raise your children. So I'm a big, I think it's a good idea. If these ethics were in place right now, I'm violating them the way I behave. I am illustrating to you, which is frankly why I do it. It's like, we need more bumpers. We need more rules. We need to know what they are. We should have started out this commission with bumpers and guardrails. But we didn't. So we agreed, whether we knew it or not, to a free fall. So that's, if I've illustrated to you the need for more rules, then I've done my job. But I do think it's a really good idea. And I can't imagine our city council saying, no, we don't want ethics. I mean, I just don't think they're going to say that.
I also,
Out loud.
I think though, ideally to add to what Commissioner Welsh was saying, in an ideal world for me, I would like to see some code of ethics or statement signed by city councilor that's readily available on their bio on the page, that it is absolutely clear and transparent. Because I worked for the city for 11 years and I had to go searching for stuff, and I understand how that happened. And so I do think that I would reiterate, I'm humble enough to understand that it does need perfecting and input, and that's why I asked for it to come to be brought before the commission as a draft. I know that there's some other legal things that probably need some review and perfecting, but so I'm open to that. So with regard to some of the comments that came earlier, that's part of the reason why we have a public process and discussion, is to make it better and to make it fit. So with that, I'll kind of leave that if there's any questions.
Sorry, Commissioner Black.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Thank you. So are you coming to the commission to ask the body to make a motion that this is a recommendation, or to ask that the commission agree that this is something we'd all like to work on and work on the specific document further?
Well, I think that really the point was to bring it forward with the intention of making a recommendation to City Council that they adopt a code of ethics. I think I would, my preference would be to give them a recommendation and not to leave it up to them to develop it, because as we've seen that, and so, I mean, to your question, I think what I would like to do is have a discussion and have a review of the line. And obviously, we're not going to solve it at this meeting. And I had no intention. I mean, that was not the intent. But if we can go through and review it to the point where I think we're comfortable as a board with the language, I would like to recommend that we do provide a recommendation to City Council that they adopt it and that they sign it and that it be clearly visible on the city's website for, and then kind of leave it where it may. But, obviously our authority ends at the recommendation. So I think that would be, does that answer your question, Mr. Black?
Yes.
Just to clarify it, there's another 50 hours of work to make it a document that's submitted. And so, the first question is this something that the commission will go for before that 50 hours of work gets
right? And I guess that was my question, was, do we all agree that we want to spend our time on working on this document, the code of ethics? Because I guess for me, I just wonder what behaviors in recent events that prompted the commission and forming the commission on a trust related topic, what behaviors would we have seen done differently in these incidents? Because just because somebody signs a document doesn't mean their behavior is going to change. And so I'm just wondering, yeah, one, do we want to spend our time on this specifically? And two, what behaviors would you hope would have been changed in these most recent incidences that kind of precipitated our commission by having a code of ethics?
You know, I think that's a good question, and I think that that, you know, obviously you can't legislate for good behavior. I mean, I don't think that that's good. It's going to happen, but I do think what we're trying to do is at least create a set of norms by which those actions can be judged going forward. And if I look at it and we can say, you know, recognize the stewardship of the public interest is in primary concern, I think that's a discussion that plays into the discussion we had earlier with the city attorney. And explaining that within the context of the code of ethics, I think, to me, I think it's a good example. And so I think it's not. I don't. I mean, to answer your question, Commissioner Black, I don't think that this necessarily would have changed anything per se. But I do think it at least gives us a baseline with which we can judge those behaviors against in terms of within that lens of trust. And I think, and honestly, I think it's simple. I mean, it's a simple statement, and it's not, like I said, it's not, communities would not be unique. And I think and I don't think it's the answer to everything that we're doing, but I do think it's a step, it's at least a step in the right direction. And, you know, and I obviously support it, and I would be willing to put some of my time into I hopefully not 50 hours, as Commissioner Walsh suggested, but
yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I wonder if our HR department, our city's HR department, if that's something that they feel like they would be willing to work on, or if city manager, I mean, what do we have currently that doesn't include what you have written in this document?
Hang on, guys. So really quick, may I pause the discussion because we're running down on time, and our next two meetings will be postponed because of holidays. So do we want to extend the meeting, and nobody wants to extend the meeting, but can then we pause this conversation so we can figure out how to do special meetings and reschedule them so we can have more conversation? Okay, so sorry about that, but Mr. Garcia, would you please help us figure out how to schedule our next two meetings?
Chair Meyer, commissioners, I laid out a process, I think in an email earlier, and I think I started to talk about it last time. Really, if you look at the boards and commissions handbook, what it says is the chair or the vice chair or 3 members can call a meeting. In order to do, if you call that meeting, you have to have an agenda. It has to be published 24 hours in advance. What gets more difficult is that under the handbook, it says that you should give notice either in person or by dropping it off at their home address, at each commissioner's home address if you can't get a hold of them in person. So, you know, what we're seeing is the intent is really to make sure that everyone is fully noticed of this. One of the processes that City Council has, because they have a provision very similar to yours, but theirs is a shall, not a should, is it says unless you waive your right to be served personally or at your home. And so there is a form that the city clerk's office has developed that could be easily tailored for it. What you would basically say is it's okay to get it by email. You know, if I get it by email, that's just as good as if you serve me. I think that process would honor the intent of the boards and commissions handbook, but allow you a lot more flexibility in terms of your meetings. Now, having said that, I think there are a few things that I want you to keep in mind. And one of them is that the facilitator has to be available.
Mr. Garcia, could you pull your mic a little closer?
So a few things that you want to be aware of is, you know, you obviously want your facilitator to be available. If this is going to be a televised meeting, you'd also have to coordinate with the city. The city council has designated the city attorney and the city manager as part of this commission, although we are only here to help you. But you know, to the extent you would want to have a meeting, for example, on a Tuesday night, I don't think that that would probably be something that would be acceptable to the city council. So managing those things, if you're willing to sign a waiver that I can have prepared tomorrow and sent out to all of you, and you can send it back with electronic signatures, you will have the ability to have special meetings as often as you need them.
All right, is that something we need to vote on? Or motion for?
It is something you should, well, I don't know that you need to vote on it, but you need to agree on it.
Okay. So would we all be in agreement to have an electronic form sent to us that would allow us, instead of having to have a piece of paper delivered to your home, to have it delivered over email? Is everybody okay with that? Raise your hand if yes. All right, everybody's hand is up.
The Chair Meyer,
Yes, please.
I think we have one person who's not in attendance.
Oh,
tonight.
yes.
So it is important that everyone sign those, and that the person who does not sign it would then still be subject to the same process of in person or at the residence. But hopefully, I think this commission is gets along pretty well and would be able to do that.
The chair can just communicate that to the member who didn't attend, right? That we don't-
Yeah, I can communicate. She was going to be listening, so she should know. But I can communicate directly with her.
Question.
Yes.
He made a statement about not being able to have the meeting on Tuesday. Is there a reason we can't just change our 20th meeting to the 21st and our 4th to the 5th and have it on the Tuesday following the meeting we're supposed to have?
The city council meetings.
Oh, they
Yeah.
always have it on a Tuesday?
Yeah. So let's,
Transportation Advisory Board moved theirs to the 11th. They meet at 4:00 on the 4th. Like, so they're gonna meet July 11th.
Pardon me, I can't tell who's speaking.
I just said Commissioner Vick, the Transportation Advisory Board just moved theirs from 4th of July to the 11th of July. So they kept it on a Monday. They just moved it.
okay, so we'll receive that notification tomorrow, and then we'll all be able to sign it, and that way we can continue our conversations. Quickly, for the next agenda items, can we continue this conversation about Code of Ethics? Are you okay with that, everybody? Okay, so Code of Ethics on there. Yes.
Indulgence before you go on, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if, is it possible that we could have, I don't know if we're ready to have the draft reviewed by the HR, or perhaps we should have more discussion before we have it reviewed, or do you have any?
I think we need to understand, I mean, it sounds like, Aaron's probably thinking not interested in the Code of Ethics. I would really like to do a straw poll, because I wasn't imagining it's 50 hours of anyone else's time. I was figuring it was going to be our time, just like the other subcommittee, did their, put in the time. So, but I'm not, I don't, if people aren't behind it, then, end of conversation. So I don't know if people have had a chance to, put their eyes on it or not, but, conceptually, if people are opposed to spending time on putting together a code of ethics, it would just be helpful to know that before we waste more time, because we don't have to discuss it all if people aren't interested.
Yes.
Chair Meyer, I want to be sure, I know that there was some concern last time about sort of walking into something and being caught off guard. The city council currently has, in part of their work plan for this year, a code of ethics process. And I just want to make you aware of that. Also, you saw the material I sent out today, which is pretty exhaustive in terms of the different kinds of policies that are out there, or codes of conduct. I think to the extent that you can identify behaviors that you think will change, as one commissioner noted, will be important, because it would be unfair for you to be in a position where they're asking you, what are you trying to do different other than consolidate, which that I certainly understand.
City Attorney, thank you for raising that. I appreciate that. That actually was going to be one of my questions. Are you guys already working on this? What are they working on, and what's the timetable?
Can we discuss this next time, because we are at 8:45? All right. Quick, go.
I think we need more discussion on whether we want the ethics before we go and spend time working on it.
I think that getting the draft of a code of ethics kind of came out of the blue. And then when I saw all of the regulations and code sections that the city already has touching on ethics, I thought there needs to be better coordination here. And I have to admit that I have a bias that you can't legislate good behavior. Now, there are certain things in the code of ethics and in the regulations that are not just good behavior, but violations of integrity and the law. So I just think that we need to have more time to merge, discuss, and is this something that we want to spend our time on with precious few special meetings available if there's already a group doing it?
Yes, so we'll add that to our next week's discussion. Everyone, please read what we have, the information that we got today, both from city attorney and the draft. I think it's great. And then let's continue this discussion next time because we need to adjourn. But we are going to do our photo real quick. And I have your name tags, but it's time. So meeting adjourned.
Great job.